I'm really grateful that we've gotten to know each other over the last, I guess it's a year now. Like I met you at our live event in March of 2020. It was our first live event. We just launched the show. We did it. It's our only live event. We did it in Los Angeles, in which Michael came out and was one of our guests on stage and was brilliant as usual. But it was we all thought it was going to be so much fun. and I was like, it sold out, and we were people came. It was amazing. But the room was dark because it was Super Tuesday, and Bernie Sanders did not do as well as a lot of people expected. And so, we went backstage. We're like, all right, we've got to make people feel good. But it was hard, man. It was a hard day.
Yeah. I was impressed at how quickly Michael pivoted personally into trying to, similar to the article Matt Karp put out many months later in Jacobin, kind of outlining, victories, what could have been done better, exactly where things went. I felt like Michael was instantaneously kind of mentally doing that and then choosing to lead with, this is a big shift. And I was pretty impressed because I personally was just sitting and, it was all young people. And then the only boomers there were, it's in my experience with the Bernie campaign. I don't know if this is like kosher to say or not, but it's most of the boomers that are involved. It's because they need health insurance. It's because they didn't play into the game of corporate, criminal greed. And it was serious stakes. And I remember just looking down the row at everyone's face and just thinking like, this is so personal and so scary.
It was, I've never done a live event like that before where we go in feeling super excited and, you're just like, you can feel people processing things on stage. It's like being in a newsroom when like a live event happens in which nobody's ever experienced, whether it's a pandemic or a terrorist attack or a death or something profound like that. And, he, as always, was able to just, I don't know, he had something in his like, spirit, his personality that just was able to kind of take the perspective out of it. And I think he just recognized as a figure in media, as a figure on stage, was a guiding force. I mean, even when you're he and so many others, myself included, had spent 5 years campaigning for Bernie and putting so much hope into him. And at that point, I think we all thought that he was doing really well, and just to be shocked like that. So it was nice to have him there.
Yeah.
So tell us this legacy project. I mean, it's been, Michael passed in July 20th, if I recall.
It's going up on, 7 months, this 20th, this February 20th.
February 20th. It'll be 7 months. And you have, he had this very popular channel on YouTube and, of course, on Patreon and podcast form. And he was at Jacobin and had all these different projects underway. How did you decide to put this together?
Well, it's a bit all over the place in terms of like you mentioned, there was a lot going on. I think kind of like the first step, I'll try and make this as concise and quick, but kind of the first step was, kind of a conversation between Matt, David, and I about how to like best transition out of, doing, the Oprah Winfrey show without Oprah. That's the lamest example I can come up with, but you know what I mean? It was this like very challenging thing because Michael's set of politics and analysis and humor and relationships were very specific to Michael, and no one can really do Michael's show in lieu of Michael. And we wanted to figure out a nice transition where we could set up, give Matt and David the platform and space to really create a show that was 100% their own, and they could really dig in and kind of continue a lot of the work that they were doing with Michael, but, not under the weight of, it's really heavy that, that music comes on, the graphic comes on, it's his name. It's quite a responsibility. And so that was kind of part of, and that worked out really beautifully. And you guys should definitely check out their work. They're doing a really great job. And then the legacy part of it was how do we, Michael's passing brought a lot of media attention, a lot of new people wanting to learn about him and learn about his work and who he was, and people want to know his story. And his story as a young person growing up in America is a little bit of it's both kind of a lot of people's stories, and it's also a bit of an unusual story. And I want to do work that I want to make a documentary film, and I'm actually starting my own show about his life called The Brief and Wondrous Life of Michael Brooks, to kind of, honor and celebrate Michael, the person. And then the tribute series that you mentioned is a series of roundtable discussions that Professor Russell Spriglia, friend of Michael's, kind of had the vision to do. And he was thinking it'd be one academic weekend. And I called him. I was like, I don't think anyone wants to be on Zoom for 48 hours, but what if we, make this a weekly event? And we're hoping that has, I jokingly refer to it as like socialist Davos. I hope that has an ongoing, like we can all gather and think about global solidarity. And I just always have Michael's voice ringing in my head. Just every person should just have dignity and respect. And, I feel like that was really at the core of his philosophy and his project. So all of these different moving pieces, and everyone can go and check out the Patreon. So I'm not just blabbing on and on.
Those photos, man.
Yeah. Little Michael.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, can I talk to you a little bit about, if you're comfortable with it, just sort of Michael's growth in politics, like how he, I know you're going to touch on this with The Brief and Wondrous Life of Michael Brooks, which is just so beautiful. I love that. But as his sister, I was watching him since he started at the Majority Report and knew him through many of those years, and just his evolution. He was just so sharp. Last year of his life, like, he was just so sharp and so focused, and at the same time, like, spiritual. It was this beautiful kind of, you don't see a lot of that in this space. It's a really rough space to be in, to be honest. When you're in media, the pace is so insane. You don't have a lot of time to think and process, let alone read. Just personally, like, that's why this idea of the book club is important to me, because I want to spend more time going deeper into work. And he just always, every time I talked to him, I just felt like he was always going deeper into work, deeper into his self, and keeping up with the fucking insane news cycle that we're living in, and keeping up with the show, which, pulling back the curtain a little bit, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And yet he found this balance to me, and I'm sure, he was nowhere near where he wanted to go with it, but among folks that I know in this space, he handled it with a lot of grace. Especially in the last year, I think, seeing how he came about.
Yeah. Part of this is like challenging to talk about. I probably won't get into, because that I think he did work too hard, and he didn't, he may be, I talked to a blood specialist the other day, because I share one of the genetic mutations that Michael had, which we didn't really know about as a family, until Michael's passing. That
led to his passing, right?
That's mostly, it's like you analyze the body and you try and figure out what caused this blood clot, and then they found these 2 genetic mutations. But to veer away from that, because that's a whole other topic, I was talking to a blood specialist, which, one second, I talked to him on Zoom for 15 minutes. I have good health insurance. I'm very lucky. I get it through the Writers Guild of my union. The consultation before insurance was, I think, $687 for 15 minutes of talking to the doctor. And then after insurance, it was around $240. I'm in a position where this isn't going to like derail me. I'm not going to be able to make rent, but I was just appalled by that. So I just had to say that, because I was just so livid that's the reality of having good insurance. Anyhow, with Michael, this was genuine for him. And, Michael had a really big ego, really big ambitions. I don't want to paint a saintly-like picture. He was very human. I think it's important to talk about that, because I think as soon as you move into the, saint so-and-so, then you take away their humanity, and it makes it less accessible and real, and I don't want to do that, but I will say is that this was very authentic for Michael. Like he was always reading. That, like, even if he wasn't doing this, even if Michael, you know, worked at a gasoline station or at a bookstore, or, you know, did something completely, you know, had a more private life, I think his personality was always that he was just reading and ingesting the news and constantly consuming books, and that had it had everything to do with what he did. And it was wonderful that that was his career and he was able to do it full time, but it was also just what he did.
I mean, but it was something like, I don't know, something about the last year. I saw a different, there was like a switch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think, you know, it's like weird because now it's like so pivotal, but I feel like, I think when you grow up and you have a lot of shame around like poverty or your circumstances, sometimes when you gain success, you feel more comfortable talking about that. And I think being honest about the things that you used to hold as shame, I think it is freeing. And I don't think that's the only thing that was going on, but I do think Michael had a transition where he went from kind of commenting on things, and then he had started to publicly make things personal and speak out about that. I think, at least with my own experience around that, it is a huge relief. It's like you're no longer like kind of constantly pretending or code switching or and our society has changed. I mean, before and after Bernie, the way we talk about class, the way people acknowledge the just, you know, I even when I look back at like Sex and the City or Entourage or these like big HBO shows from like you know, not that long ago, it's like the idea of like this illusion around like I mean, you know, whatever, take that example as you will, but like I just feel like there's been such a huge shift with people kind of getting more in touch with the reality of what's happening here in this country. It
was like a pseudo normalcy that was not. I mean, first time I moved to New York, I remember like thinking, wait, how did all these Friends people live in these ginormous apartments? Even with
the
like
paleontologist and the part-time employee at Ralph Lauren have the same living environment. Yeah,
it's but I mean, it's like such a conscious thing. It's like it permeates every single aspect of our society to almost trick people into thinking that, you know, not only is it achievable to like live this magnificent New York lifestyle where you're buying, you know, $1,000 Manolo Blahniks with a, you know, columnist salary in the middle of a media crisis, but also like that you can do it and others are doing it, and if you're not doing it, then there's a shame that you know associated with, in which, you know, it's personalized. And I think he was able to kind of grasp that in a way that was different than most. Discuss it.
Yeah, it's funky stuff. And then you also like, now I feel like the switch side of it too is that at the same time you also, and Michael did a really beautiful job of this, it's like there's a really big difference of growing up homeless or like never, you know, like not having any parents in your life and being on your own, or being like housing, you know, what's the word I'm looking for now? Food and insecure. Michael was really good at like not like dramatizing or being like, you know, like my sobs, you know, he was just very like, I have a relationship to this because I went through these things compared to like a lot of other circumstances. I was relatively, you know, lucky and whatever. And I appreciated kind of like how he held that, because I feel like that's the flip side of it too. Like the poverty porn of like, you know, the performativeness, and that I think he kind of also was really turned off by that. So I really appreciated when I would watch him on his live streams on the show, personalized stuff. I was like, oh, this is just right. Kind of acknowledging, telling your personal way in and not overshadowing what you're covering by your own, you know, narration.
Well, because the truth is it's way more common than people, like the way that sometimes it's illustrated in the news when someone comes out that, you know, achieves success and says, well, I was actually, you know, experienced XYZ. It's like you said, it's very performative. There's like a porn aspect to it. It's almost like a monetization aspect to it. Or how do we expand on this and make this a thing, when the truth is the majority of people have, you know, if you are coming from a working class household, have faced some form of insecurity in your life, and it's just going to get worse.
Right.
Lisha, if you're comfortable talking about this, like what was Michael working on, moving forward? What was he thinking about? And yeah.
I mean, that's like such a large question, and there's so many people who can speak to, like I can't scratch the surface of what him and Professor Richard Wolff are working on together, or what, like there's so many different categories. I do know one thing he and I spoke about a lot was just, and I think he would have been like so bummed by what's happened this past couple of months with all this infighting and drama, but he just really wanted to normalize being on the left, kind of get rid of all of these different like subcultures, categories. That was just, I think he talked to me at least, and I'm sure Matt and David and other folks would have different insight, but he talked to me about just like wanting TMBS to like maybe not even 100% be like focused on politics, and like he was really trying to like expand. I think he was just very aware of just like how the right just had such a chokehold on the normal. And that's not to like, glorify dysfunction or ugly. I'm not like trying to use normal as like a caveat for ugly societal problems. I'm just saying like the accessibility was just something that was like, he was really aware of. And I don't know. I mean, the last conversation we had was about 14 hours before he died. We FaceTimed. He seemed completely fine. I mean, he was like a little tired. And I had been to a protest and I was just talking to him. I was like, what happens after this? What's the next strategy? Like, the uprising's kind of dying down. The police have kind of like figured out their gridlock on this. Like, what is it stopping commerce anymore? Is it what? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. We have to figure out the next thing. This is kind of the end of this. But I had no idea he was going to die the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So in terms of the Legacy Project, can you talk a little bit about what you've touched on with this project? Who's appeared? Who's in the works? Yeah.
So the Legacy Project is kind of like the overarching, like, it's kind of like what... when someone passes away, it's very obvious what to do with their like personal social media or what, it kind of just like becomes like a tune, it's like it's done. Like they've passed, it's private. But with Michael and TMBS and the amount of global community that he had built up and the amount of kind of virtual grieving, it felt like creating a foundation or something in his honor felt important. And then it kind of became obvious that he had already created it. He had built a digital community. And then it's like, how do you, it's very complicated stuff. It's like, how do you honor someone and their work, stay relevant, not ever like use his image for like some agenda or some purpose that isn't in line with what he was about, which right now is easy to do because it's like the people who are closest to him do have that access and ability. It's kind of thinking about like if it goes long term or if things, whatever, that's a whole other thing. But the tribute series, which I think is what you're asking about, is available on the TMBS YouTube. I think it's going to end up being about a 14-part series. There's 3 more that will be released publicly. The patrons get early access to the panels. And we've really ran the gamut of different topics. We started with Dr. Cornel West and Slavoj Žižek going back and forth about the future of the left, and also, chatting about Michael. It's a really wonderful, yeah. You guys are on it. There's a playlist, and it has all of the, you can see Waz Lambre and Anna Kasparian were on. Nomiki hosted honestly, I really want everyone to check it out. It's on sex and gender on the left, and it was such a great discussion.
So good.
I need to start clipping a lot of them. I know people don't always watch the full discussion. We have a lot of clipping to do, but. They're just kind of various topics, and some of them are more like quite, literally aligned in parts of Michael's project and work, and kind of, we just had one with Jeremy Johnson, Brent Cooper, and good friend of, and advisor of Michael's, Ben Beish, and they kind of very literally sort of looked at one of his last live streams and kind of used that as a jumping off point to continue discussing some stuff that he had put out maybe about 4 days before his passing. And then some of them are like, like the sex and gender one, Michael obviously wasn't like particularly like focused on that in his work. That wasn't so much a part of his project, but in terms of like being really like deeply interested in supporting people globally and not letting identity get in the way of truly supporting folks are actually in my mind actually being a feminist and what that means in terms of paying people.
Yes.
Was absolutely part of his project. So it was really wonderful to thank you for hosting. You did a beautiful job with that.
Thank you. I mean, first off, thank you for thinking about it and thinking of me. I mean, what I really appreciate about that is even in my own personal conversations with Michael about there were some moments where we didn't always agree on things, and it was always intellectual. It was never a personal thing. It was just sort of an intellectual exercise where he even broke I had to think about things in a different perspective. And these are really tough questions, like the Elizabeth Warren question, for instance. Like, was she, I love, you and I are both
I don't like. But anyways, sorry to.
No, I mean, I always thought that Joe Biden was the biggest threat to Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I actually didn't feel like Warren was dividing the left as much as many felt. But it was an emotional experience. And I think a lot of people were wrapped up in it. So we kind of went back and forth on it a few times. But, and I obviously came at it from a perspective of being a woman and like, look, there are all these other people who are stealing votes from Bernie and we're not. But it was like part political, part and just your own experience. But he was very open to having those conversations.
Yeah. I think for Michael, it's just that he just was really dogmatic about analysis. Like it really genuinely had nothing to do with Elizabeth Warren being a woman. It was the fact that she was trying to run in this ultra progressive lane, and it just wasn't adding up, what she was saying versus what she was doing. The whole, Bernie and I are in this together, and the attack, it wasn't in line with and I'm not saying that Michael was some sort of oh, this is good. And, it's just, he actually just really was pushing for a change in this country. And he did not see Elizabeth Warren being authentic in that. I've also probably spent a lot of time arguing with Michael. The annoying thing is that he usually was right, and it's actually, almost always was right, but our last conversation, we almost started to kind of get into a fight about something. I can't remember. We were kind of knocking heads, and then he said and I think I've said this before on YouTube somewhere, but I'll say it again. And he said well, do you want me to explain it to you or not? And I said, and I was about to you'd be and then I thought about it for 1 second, and I was like, no, I actually do want you to explain it to me, because I think you are probably right about this, but I'm missing a beat. And, he explained whatever it was and his reason for why he thought that, and X, Y, and Z based on, facts. And I was like,
or history or something. I mean,
or history yeah.
That was the great thing about having debates with him. And it didn't, honestly, I don't think I debated him that often. I mean, it's like debating, I rarely debate Sam. I rarely debate Michael. I think there's a basis for our political theory. It's coming from some sort of basis, and we don't always agree on everything, and we have different personalities. But that one was interesting to me because his thoughts were based in a very a respectable perspective. Mine was based on gender and political numbers game. His was based on this is what the left should be if I'm saying this right. And she's sort of tainting that. But I was but it's not real. And it was a brand.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. I mean, I think for him, it was just do we need to, I think he saw her as part of the diversifying the ruling class, shiny, women stay in your place. One of you is up there representing you.
Exactly.
Diaspora.
Which is right. Also very true.
Yeah. And in LA, working in entertainment, I mean, I was oftentimes throughout all this, like the idea of like not being with Lauren was like, you know, oh my God, like what do you like go home and like sign up to be like declitterized? Like what's wrong? You know, like, it was like unthinkable. Like, you know, what kind of self-hating, you know, I joke like the secret like Taliban wives of the Bernie brothers. Like, you know, just like, absolutely unthinkable.
You need a voice for that, though. You got to do a voice. Yeah.
Oh, the impersonation.
Well, not of the Taliban wives, of the elite
we'll
class.
Say that for Michael.
The the Hollywood elites telling you these things. Like,
I mean, it wasn't even the thing that I think people don't even sometimes realize on the Bernie side of it is a lot of it was like, you know, there's this like really beat up car on my block that's covered in Pete Buttigieg stickers.
Oh my God.
It's not like necessarily like always, it's like more just like PMC values, even if you're like barely clinging on to having a good income, or even if you're working these kind of like, you know, salaried, you know, highly credentialed jobs, but you're still getting paid nothing. Right. But you're in line with the right kind of feminism and the right kind of, you know,
identity,
status, identity signaling.
Don't worry. Just tell that guy that Pete Buttigieg will take care of all transportation for everybody. So that
I literally like can't. I'm worried now. People are gonna know where I live because I feel like this must be an outlier. But I'm always just like, I look at that car. I'm just like, what is happening? Like, what is
just
this
leave a little note.
It never ceases to amaze me. No, I think it's him. Yeah.
It's actually Pete Buttigieg's mom.
Yeah. She was evicted during the Wi-Fi and the sewer house zoning situation.
Horrible thing, yeah. Lisha, I love having conversations with you. If you're open to it, I'd love to have you back on and we could talk a little bit more about feminism. I know you have a lot of thoughts and you have your own political perspective, but I feel like this was a really great opportunity for everybody to kind of learn about what's happening with Michael's legacy and what you're doing to honor his work. And it's beautiful. And also it's like you have your own career and life and now you've been putting Michael's legacy, you know, equally as important in your life in terms of time. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Can I say one last thing?
Of course.
I listen to a lot of Democracy Now! She's like, you have 3 seconds. Michael and I had a lot of plans to collaborate together, and we kind of worked in parallel career, you know, paths. And I think Michael was trying to figure out how to make something entirely of his own on his own grounds and make it more mainstream. And I've spent a lot of time, you know, trying to figure out how to make things that you are working with Netflix or Disney or whatever, and trying to, you know, pull what's possible in those realms. And we always planned on collaborating on films or documentaries. And Michael was really pushing me to start my own podcast. So some of this is kind of like my last way of ever getting to in any way collaborate with my brother. So it's maybe in some ways like it's like something that I always thought was going to happen, and now it's happening in this really challenging way. But it feels like my last chance to like make it happen. So I'm grateful for the wonderful fans and friends and community that he built that is supporting that. And in some ways it feels like kind of like a gift from him. So, yeah.
We love Michael so much. I mean, personally, he made such a big impact on my life. I mean, you know, he not only were we friends before I ran for office and then would go on his show and Majority Report, but he like showed up to everything, in the middle of the worst winter in New York, campaigning for me and believing in me and having conversations and then afterwards showing up for so many different candidates and having them on his show and just giving people a chance and, you know, practicing what he preached on the ground. And that's not happening enough in media just in general, and definitely not enough in this media space that we live in. And so I thank you. Just thank you for living this out and gifting his fans and the world now that had, I mean, so many people, as you mentioned at the top, learned about Michael, and unfortunately with his passing, being such a big story, but they're learning about him now. And so, we're just grateful to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on the show. And just trying to get smarter and build better analysis now that Michael's gone. So also on my own path, I definitely do not know everything by any means. Feel like every day I'm expanding what I knew and what I thought. So if I said anything insane over the last 20 minutes, forgive me. We're all growing, and I might have a completely different take tomorrow.
This is Femme Friday. That was like a very gendered thing to say. You are brilliant. What would Michael do? Would Michael ever say that? No,
but Michael did authentically, he was more of an expert in some of it. You know what I mean? Like there are the things I feel more expertise, and I feel like it's just been an unusual situation where I've said this before too. It's I feel like I kind of went on this show to kind of hold my brother's space, and I immediately was in the space where everyone thought I was way smarter and way stupider than I am. And I literally sometimes at the beginning of the week will listen to something or read something. By the end of the week have right now I'm really getting deep into the difference of direct action and helping a cause versus charity, just the inner workings of virtue signaling versus actually spreading awareness. I'm just trying to get cleaner on these things. I feel like Michael was just innately I don't know, just had really sharp analysis on all of it.
Well, it was his life's work. So, don't beat yourself up.
Oh,
we're all learning.
Totally.
Lisha Brooks, we love you. Come back on.
Great. Yeah,
let's talk politics together.
Okay, sorry. No, that was a Femme Friday. That would have been the
oh my God, I'm sorry. No, you're sorry. I'm sorry.
Thank you
We're
for
sorry.
having me.
What?
Sorry that I came on. Okay.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.